So we are here at APEC with Omer Davidi, who is the co-founder and CEO of BeeHero. Very cool company. I want you to start by telling us what you do.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. We deal with supporting the bees. So if I want to elaborate a little bit more, we are supporting beekeepers to manage beehives in a more efficient way and address the colony collapse disorder, the bee mortality issue that the world is facing. And the important part of it is not necessarily how it affects the honey industry, but the fact that 75% of the crops out there depends on those bees for pollination. So practically we are optimizing pollination process, working very closely with beekeepers with low-cost IoT sensors that we developed that goes into the beehives.
So I want to unpack this a little bit because you've got AI, you've got tracking technology. Let's start with what was the genesis of this idea for you? When did you decide that bees was going to be your life work?
So it's interesting. My background is cybersecurity. So the friends laugh at the fact that I moved from cybersecurity to food security. It started when I met one of my co-founders, Itai Kanot, who is a second-generation commercial beekeeper, and I was keen to learn more about colony collapse disorder and the fact that there's not a lot of technology involved in beekeeping, trying to understand why. And that's where we started to think of, let's pull data from inside hives and see whether technology can help. So the first part was to understand, can you build a POC? The second one was to try and understand, can you build a successful company that addresses this kind of an issue?
So you put technology inside the hive. What did you discover? What data did you glean from that exercise that then made you think there's a business here?
So we have 9 different sensors inside the hive on this unit that we developed. The major ones would be temperature, humidity, and sound. Some of the interesting discoveries, I would say, is that the hive operates as a superorganism. It has one queen, which is, in a way, the heart of the colony. And the ability to identify certain patterns, so for example, if we look at the sound, we identified certain patterns that indicates that the bees are stressed because the queen is not performing well. Identifying a queen failure early on allows beekeepers to replace those queens and save those colonies. And that's just one example of a situation of which you save a colony.
Can I ask, did you glean anything about why colonies are collapsing? Like when you look across all the data that you've seen, whether it's why the queen is under stress, is it climate related? That's what a lot of people think it is, or are there other factors you're seeing that come into play for failure?
There are definitely other factors as well. So I think the fact that the environment changes and we have, drier winters or extreme weather conditions in general affects the beekeeper's ability to address bee needs early on because they're not used to this environment behavior in a way. We see a lot more issues with regards to queen failure, whether it's exposure to chemicals or whether it's just the intensity of beekeeping. A beekeeping industry was based on honey production for thousands of years.
Yep.
Over the last 10, 15 years, it becomes more oriented towards pollination because we built such a efficient food system, but we need pollinators to support it.
Yeah.
So beekeepers are moving hives several times a year on trucks, millions of hives.
Which is disruptive.
Yeah. So they need to be able to address issues better. They need to be able to address disease early on. And because they don't have full transparency to what happens in every single hive 24/7, they struggle to do so.
So the evolution of your technology, I know you have the tracking technology and the sensors. How have the advances in AI impacted what you do?
So I think in general we see 2 aspects in technology that changes with time. The first one is the affordability of IoT components. So it used to cost hundreds
Internet of Things,
yeah.
Right? So all the connectivity,
the connectivity and the hardware components that used to be extremely expensive. Right. Now with few dollars, you can put a sensor in a hive and start collect data. So that's one thing that supports unit economics and the CapEx play in trying to introduce new solutions. The second thing is the access to AI components that we didn't have before, whether it's the affordability of those things or the computational power. And we spent the first few years of BeeHero to build a data set. It was all about collecting data that was never existed before. And the second aspect is introducing AI models, as you mentioned, in order to identify those patterns. And I think as we get, we talk a lot about generative AI and so on. As we get more access to strong tools with the proprietary data that we've collected, we can introduce, very interesting solutions across the board.
Well, what are some of those solutions? Because I'm imagining that you detect stress. Let's say, not to be simplistic, but you detect something's going wrong. The queen's failing somehow. Do the beekeepers then bring a new queen, introduce a new queen before failure takes place? Or what is the human interaction that actually staves off disaster here?
I think it's a discussion that we tend to have, whether AI will replace humans or whether it needs to work and support humans. And I think what we see now is that the beekeepers, the commercial beekeepers that survive until now are good beekeepers. They know how to keep their bees. It's about giving them access to data and transparency they didn't have before.
Right.
So when we alert them about queen failure, they know how to replace queens. When we alert about certain diseases, they know how to treat them. The majority of issues that we encounter with can be treated, and if treated early on, the probability of success is almost 100%. And that's why you need to combine, I would say, the expertise of a commercial beekeeper together with new tools that are now affordable and available.
So beekeepers don't strike me as necessarily the wealthiest people on the planet. They can be. When you look at your business model, it's almost feels a little bit like a B2C model. I'm sure it's not. Is there an enterprise model around this? Like, are the big food companies, which are also worried about food security, are they looking to you as well to help them?
So the first thing we understood is that we need to work as partners with the commercial beekeepers. So our customers are not the commercial beekeepers, those are our partners in order to introduce better pollination practices to the industry. We sell precision pollination as a service directly to the farmers, and that's where we introduced this more of a B2B model. And I think one of the interesting developments, we got General Mills who joined our Series B a year ago, and we start to open the doors into those big retailers that are focused on biodiversity and sustainable agriculture and different ways that consumers cares about. And now we have metrics. We can measure objectives in order to introduce more sustainable score or metrics to assess the things that we buy and we eat. So I think we're probably still 2 years away from what happened in the carbon emission space, but it's getting there. I'm sure it's getting there.
Okay, when you say 2 years away from what happened in the carbon emission space, what happened in the carbon emission? What do you mean by that? Are you talking about carbon credits and sort of a common platform, or just clarify?
So we see a lot of initiatives that talks about, pollinator friendly, bee friendly, biodiversity, like things that we need to address as we grow food, unless we want to, mortgage all the resources of our next and next generations. With the carbon emission, there's an easy way to assess the emission, and then you can build a marketplace of which, big companies can buy the credits from others to be a little bit more ESG driven and so on. I think on the biodiversity aspect, bee aspects and so on, it's still unclear how do we want to measure those things. Once we identify the objectives that we measure, then we can establish some sort of a marketplace. Now that's not
So is that your
BeeHero
goal?
law.
You'd like to establish a marketplace or be a player in a marketplace?
We want to support the marketplace. We're not the right entity to develop this marketplace. I think it should be a coalition of big retailers that decide, okay, this is how we're going to measure things, and consumer needs to agree with it. For us, it's about providing access to data that was never available before. So you can really understand what was the mortality rates of bee colonies during pollination activity. You can really track when use of chemicals was used in order to treat certain disease without affecting biodiversity. So there's a balance that we need to find, because the population is growing. We need to become more efficient, but we need to do it in a more sustainable way.
I feel like I'm quizzing you on a quiz show here, because you may or may not know the answer, but how many bees are there in the world, and how much have the numbers gone down, just for some clarity, because we always hear about it in percentage terms.
So today we have around 100 million beehives worldwide. And we tend to see around 40% mortality every year. So, think of 40% of cattle will die every year.
That's a calamity
right?
on
Beekeepers are spending a lot more resources in order to revive those dead hives, so the bee population is pretty stable over the last few years. I think that the bigger concern is the fact that commercial beekeepers are getting older. The average age of a commercial beekeeper in the US today is around 70.
70.
So, 10 years from
Has not been
now,
a lucrative profession perhaps for the next generation.
because the margin drops, it becomes, intense, labor-intense work, and you don't get the good ROI. So why would the next generation continue? And that's where we need to, find a better way as an ecosystem to support beekeepers who are basically holding the food supply system, and making sure that they benefit from doing this, and also we support the farmers. Otherwise, we might wake up one day and we'll have no beekeepers to manage those
and they
beehives.
are so critical to the ecosystem. Is your technology applicable to other areas? Like even you're talking about biodiversity. Obviously, there are many human guardians of animal colonies that we watch. I mean, how do you think about where the growth comes from, other than market, expansion and?
Yeah, so we definitely started with the U.S. market, and we focused at the beginning in the almond industry in California, which produce 80% of the almonds in the world. So it's quite concentrated area of which almond being grown, and now we spread to cherries and apples and blueberries and many other crops.
All within the context of bees.
Yes, we've done some interesting research collaborations with seed producers. So vegetable seed requires pollination as well, and they struggle a lot with the challenge of pollination. So we introduced also in-field sensors, and that takes us maybe one step further towards the biodiversity play. So today we provide seed producers indications about the pollination activity in the field, not just by the honeybees, the Apis mellifera that we refer to, but also about bumblebees and hoverflies and some other pollinators. So it gives a better understanding of how growing those seeds or food in general affects also the environment.
Can you give us some sense of your success? Maybe you can't tell me what your revenue is, but how many customers do you have, or how much of the market do you have?
So I think one of the things that I've heard, coming into the agtech industry, that you cannot scale companies very fast in this industry. And I think the smart thing we've done in the early days, maybe it was luck, you can backtrack and try to figure out. We try to focus not necessarily on the best way to monetize our technology, but on measurable objectives. And we've managed to become the largest pollination provider in the US in 4 years.
Okay.
So we scaled to tens of millions of dollars in revenues, going to be triple digits ideally in 2024 if we meet our goals. So we are scaling very fast in this industry. We're introduced to more geographies. We became the largest pollination provider in Australia this year. Mm-hmm. So the adoption is good. I think the fact that we created this win-win-win model where the beekeepers benefit using new technology, the farmers get more assurance into the pollination process, and we can leverage the technology in the best possible way, allows us to create an ecosystem where everyone wants BeeHero to basically scale.
Yeah.
So it's quite exciting.
That's nice.
Yeah.
I know one of the pain points must be you've got a big your R&D facilities are in Israel. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
How has the conflict between Israel and Hamas, the war, how has that impacted you?
So I think it impacts everyone in
yeah.
Israel. We are a proud Israeli company. We're not commercially operating in Israel, but we do have the R&D center there. And the October 7th, almost a month ago, a little bit more than a month ago, we had the deadliest terror attack since 9/11. I think for me as a CEO and someone who's running the company, it's about first of all supporting our Israeli team. Almost everyone I know was affected in a way, whether it's the first or the second circle. Israel is tiny. Everyone knows everyone in a way. And the impact was huge. So the first most important thing is to support the team members and the family of the team members and make sure that we create flexible way for them to digest what was happening. I think now what we see is also tragic. We have civilians on both sides suffering because of how terror in a way affects our life. And that's where we need to, on one hand, communicate to our other team members in the US and Australia to give them the context of how to operate, and also to make sure that we keep delivering. Because maybe one of the most significant cultural aspects about Israelis is the resilience, and we don't want to let anything affect our plans.
No, it's very true.
It's a thin balance.
I had spoken to a lot of Israeli entrepreneurs prior to October 7th, and the concern at that point obviously was about what was happening in the domestic political situation with Netanyahu and, you know, the courts and such. Just give us a sense of how the business community is feeling right now. I know there's a lot of pain, obviously, with regard to this horrific terrorist attack that took place, but as a startup culture, which Israel is, have there been concerns that things are happening that might impinge that culture in some way?
I don't think about impinging the culture. I do think that, you know, the financial institutions, they like stability. So, you know, whether it's a war, terror attacks, or whether it's, you know, the internal debate about the judicial reform, all those things affect that stability, or, you know, the future stability of the country, and raises questions. I think the interesting part about the VC world and so on is that some sees it as, you know, maybe now it's not the best time to invest in Israeli companies, especially those who did not invest in Israel will not start now.
There's a lot of VCs in Israel too.
Yes, and I think some that already invest in Israel understand the Israeli culture and also see this as an opportunity, right? So when there's lack of stability, then there's an opportunity. So I don't think we see an impact that is necessarily affected by the judicial reform or the war. It's not helping, I can tell you. Luckily, BeeHero is not in a place where we are raising money now, so we are pretty good on where we stand, but
as
it definitely
a CEO, may I ask, do you ever think about relocating some of your staff to other places because of concern about the landscape? And you know, if you feel like it's like, who's to say, maybe it's too early.
So, as I mentioned, we are a proud Israeli company and we want to stay this way. I do have a board members and eventually I'm responsible for the success of BeeHero. And at the point where I feel that being an Israeli company will affect BeeHero's ability to succeed, then we will definitely revisit this. But, you know, we have access to the best engineers in Israel, people that spend many years in the Israeli intelligence force and bring technology and knowledge that does not necessarily exist in many other places. So I do see a lot of value in it. So that would be probably the last result, which I don't expect to happen. But yes, it's on the table.
Yeah. No, and look, I think about, you know, Shimon Peres, Yossi Var. There's so many people who have built such an incredible engine, not just for Israel, but for the region. You know, there are some protesters here. I haven't seen the full mix. You're based in San Francisco, you're based in Silicon Valley. This is a global gathering. I know some of them tried to stop people from coming in. I don't even know what to say. I don't even know what the question is, but how does that impact this event or even the city itself?
I think in general we see more hate crimes, anti-Semitic acts, which, you know, make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. Like, you know, the U.S. is basically a country of immigrants, right? And I've been living here for the last 5 years in California. I haven't encountered any situation until recently. You know, I don't feel comfortable to put, you know, Israeli flag on my doorstep because I don't want my kids to be involved with those kind of acts. I think it's about messaging and communication where the Israeli government needs to spend more efforts in educating the world what's happening. It's not two countries that fights. It's a terror organization that hides underneath hospitals and shooting missiles on civilians. And there's no an easy solution for this. Again, I'm not a military expert, but
no, I agree. I mean, I think that you know, if one side put down their weapons, what the other side would do, and I think that there's clearly been a terrorist attack, and it's something that was devastating to Israel, and its war is devastating to everybody. So let me go back and circle back to your company, and thank you for sharing what I'm sure is very personal for you. Anything that else is on your radar in terms of what's next and around the corner for you in terms of what's exciting as an entrepreneur?
One of the interesting things that we've built over the last almost 6 years is the largest data set of bees and pollination out there. And we got now to a scale of which we track and monitor pollination activity of a significant portion of different crops. So, you know, we've pollinated 10% of the almonds in the US, which is around 8% of the almonds in the world. Mm-hmm. early on indications about pollination activity, supports commodity traders in making smart decisions on, pricing and supply. So we are now working with some big commodity traders and hedge funds to see how we can leverage pollination data, bee data,
To
in
help
order
them
to
sell
support,
futures, basically?
in a way, yeah.
Oh, very cool.
So
Great.
always new
You'll be
opportunities
an
comes up.
investment play. So that's good. Well, thank you for joining us, and I wish you a successful event here, and look forward to what's next for your company.
Thank you so much. Thank you.